Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are undertaking, well, perhaps the most critical analysis in modern military strategy, really getting inside the operational blueprint of the People's Liberation Army.
Yeah,
If you follow global security, you definitely know that China is pretty much universally designated as the U.S. pacing threat.
that's exactly right. And, the discussion around this adversary often gets stuck on the hardware. You hear about the ships, the missiles, the fighter jets.
Right.
But the real challenge, I think, lies in understanding their core military philosophy. How do they actually plan to use all that hardware? And maybe even more importantly, how do they define winning?
Mm-hmm. So our mission today is essentially to give you, the listener, a rapid but still really intensive masterclass in that blueprint.
Yeah, a shortcut through the key ideas.
Exactly. We've synthesized foundational, unclassified analysis that's used throughout U.S. defense education. We're drawing heavily from the foundational Army Techniques publication 7-100.3, Chinese Tactics.
A key document.
Absolutely. And also the detailed training and doctrine command paper, How China Fights in Large-Scale Combat Operations.
Right, so we're pulling the core operational concepts directly from these essential sources. And the whole exercise, really, is designed to answer one central question.
Yeah.
How did the People's Liberation Army transform its doctrine? How did it get from this historical reliance on mass popular insurgency, they call People's War?
Right, the Maoist idea.
Exactly. To its current, much more sophisticated focus on high technology, multi-domain, joint operations, what they call system warfare. That whole transition, that's really the narrative arc for our deep dive today.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning then. The philosophical starting point, active defense. Now, just hearing that name, it sounds kind of neutral, maybe even a bit passive.
It does.
But the reality, as explained in that foundational Army Techniques publication, it's much more complex, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It is the defining contradiction, maybe, of their strategy. The core takeaway that really needs to stick with the listener is that active defense is strategically defensive. It aims to secure China's sovereignty, deter conflict.
Okay.
But, and this is the key part, it is fundamentally enabled by aggressive, proactive, operational, and tactical offensive actions.
Ah, okay. So their overall political stance is defensive, we're protecting ourselves,
Right.
but their military method to achieve that is offensive. Why is that specific phrasing, that duality, so important to their worldview?
Well, if you look at history, China has often perceived itself as being, surrounded by hostile powers or competing interests. So the defensive posture serves to deter conflict, project stability.
Makes sense.
However, the Foundational Army Techniques publication makes it crystal clear that they reserve the right to seize the initiative. They can do that through preemptive action or a really robust counterattack the moment conflict looks unavoidable.
So they won't just sit back and take the first punch.
Exactly. It means they won't wait passively for an attack to land before responding. They will launch their own offensive operations to protect the homeland as they see it.
And this isn't new thinking, right? This duality has deep roots. We're not talking about some recent policy paper. This goes back to, well, Sun Tzu and Mao Zedong.
Precisely. The People's Liberation Army views both Sun Tzu's The Art of War and Mao's concept of People's War as equally essential. They see them together, forming the modern framework.
Interesting.
From Sun Tzu, they get that ultimate ideal to win without fighting. And this isn't just a military goal, right? It's a strategic directive to leverage every tool available. Skilled diplomacy, shrewd political moves, even covert operations, all aimed at setting the conditions for victory without ever needing kinetic action, if possible.
Winning without fighting. Okay, that sounds like it ties directly into this more modern strategy of managing and containing conflict. The Training and Doctrine Command paper calls it war control or effective control. How does the military sort of manage a war before it's even technically begun?
Yeah, war control is a huge concept. The Training and Doctrine Command paper really details this. It's China's systematic method for managing the entire escalation ladder.
Okay.
The goal is always to strictly contain conflicts, to achieve specific political and military objectives while minimizing the risk of things spiraling out of control, unintended escalation.
Right.
And this posture really emphasizes establishing dominance through nonviolent means during peacetime and competition. It's viewed as a continuum.
I see. So war control means using things like political pressure, economic leverage, information tools during this peacetime competition phase
Exactly.
to make sure that if a conflict does start, it's already on terms that are favorable to China. and they can dictate the scope and pace.
That's it, precisely.
Right.
They aim to deny the enemy the ability to dictate the terms, the scope of the fight, if they can use, say, economic pressure or public opinion warfare to achieve 90% of their objective.
Uh-huh.
Then the remaining 10%, if kinetic action becomes necessary, is much, much lower risk.
Yeah.
It's a really integrated view of state power.
Okay, let's track that doctrinal shift you mentioned earlier. The original concept, people's war mass mobilization against a technologically superior foe, that's historical now, but the concept itself, it hasn't disappeared, has it? It's continually evolved.
Right, it's adapted.
Yeah.
It has moved through two distinct phases before reaching where we are today. The Foundational Army Techniques publication outlines this progression pretty clearly.
Okay.
So, after the Cold War ended, and especially after seeing the, frankly, dramatic display of U.S. technological superiority in conflicts like the First Gulf War,
A wake-up call.
a huge wake-up call, the People's Liberation Army realized its mass manpower-focused doctrine was, well, obsolete against that kind of power. This led to the first big transition, people's war under modern conditions.
Right. That sounds like basically an acknowledgement that, okay, we need mechanization, we need better equipment.
Precisely. That phase emphasized joint operations, much greater mechanization, and the need for precision long-range artillery. It was a move toward fighting more conventional battles, not just relying on guerrilla tactics.
But that still wasn't enough, apparently.
No, it paved the way for the most consequential shift, which is the current doctrine, people's war in conditions of informationization.
Informationization. What does that final phase, that specific term, truly imply for the People's Liberation Army's military capability and maybe its global ambitions?
Well, this represents a massive shift, as detailed in the Foundational Army Technique publication. It's basically the People's Liberation Army asserting that they believe they've acquired sufficient information capabilities. We're talking cyber, space, electronic warfare,
The whole suite.
the whole suite, enough to successfully employ them in large-scale regional conflicts. It signals a real confidence. And critically, this doctrine requires the People's Liberation Army to move far beyond just defending China's borders. It necessitates the ability to protect the Chinese Communist Party's interests and maintain economic stability internationally.
So the shift to informationization demands not just better tech, but a complete overhaul in training, professionalization, and fundamentally expeditionary capacity. The ability to project power far from home.
Right. It's a definite shift away from that traditional localized mass resistance idea towards embracing technology, joint capabilities, and the capacity for rapid power projection. It's about being a global player, backed by a professional military force.
Okay. And that focus on economic and political interests, beyond just pure military might, brings us to another really foundational idea: comprehensive national power. This is explicitly not just about tanks and planes, is it? It's about overall state influence.
Absolutely. Comprehensive national power is China's strategic lens. It's defined in the Foundational Army Techniques publication as their method of assessing and, frankly, ranking countries based on the totality of their state influence.
Ranking them.
Yeah. It's the whole of government approach.
Yeah.
Military capability, defense industry, technology, combined with soft power economic strength, diplomatic efforts, global image, cultural influence.
So in this view, military action is really just one tool among many, almost subordinate.
Absolutely. The military is one instrument in the orchestra of state power, you could say. Every conflict, or even peacetime competition, must ultimately be conducted in a way that enhances China's overall comprehensive national power. It makes every military decision inherently political and economic as well. And this whole of society effort, it's formalized through mechanisms like military-civil fusion.
Military-civil fusion. That's a term we hear constantly. Let's dig into what it actually means, especially for you, the listener, trying to grasp the depth of China's preparation. How does the civilian economy directly feed the military machine?
It is the critical enabler of comprehensive national power. As the Training and Doctrine Command paper explains, military-civil fusion is the systematic integration of civilian economic power, science and technology, and national infrastructure to ensure direct support for military development and operations. It effectively eliminates the traditional firewall between civilian and military sectors.
Can you give us a concrete example? How is this actually codified into law? Because this isn't just aspirational policy, right? It's mandated.
No, it's legally mandated. For example, you have documents like China's 2016 Defense Transportation Law. It dictates that state-owned and private enterprises must actively build capabilities and train to support defense efforts.
Wow.
This massively broadens the state's authority to basically requisition civilian vehicles, logistics facilities, materials, even specialized personnel like high-tech engineers or ship captains during wartime or crises.
So the legal structure is there.
Yes, this legal structure ensures the People's Liberation Army has rapid, guaranteed access to the nation's cutting-edge commercial technology and its deep national sustainment capacity in a conflict.
Okay, that integration of soft and hard power, civilian and military, leads us directly to the tools they use in that competition phase, long before any shots might be fired. The three warfares.
Right. The three warfares are essential, non-lethal components of China's approach to conflict. They exist alongside hard military power on that continuum we talked about.
Uh-huh.
The Foundational Army Techniques publication names them as public opinion warfare, psychological warfare, and legal warfare.
Let's focus maybe a bit more intensely on public opinion warfare. The source material uses the Chinese term huayuquan, and it seems far more systematic, more strategic than just simple propaganda.
Oh, much more. Huayuquan translates roughly as the right to speak and be heard. But the Chinese interpretation is really a strategic concept. It means the power to seize and set the terms of a global debate or negotiation.
Seize the terms of the debate.
Exactly. The Foundational Army Techniques publication makes it clear that they view this as capable of seizing the ultimate initiative in a conflict before physical hostilities even start.
So how do they actually operationalize that? How do they use huayuquan?
By shaping the discourse, right? Influencing political positions globally, generating international sympathy or condemnation where they need it. They use their vast global media systems, their economic influence, digital platforms, all targeting both foreign governments and domestic audiences back home.
So it's multi-pronged.
Very. The goal is to delegitimize adversaries, justify their own actions through what might look like neutral media channels, and control the narrative so completely that the opposing side finds itself fighting a political battle on the world stage before they've even fired a shot.
Winning the information war before the kinetic war.
That's the goal. Win it long before.
Okay. That makes the other two warfares, psychological and legal, sound almost like supporting elements for that main cognitive control strategy.
They are, and they're deeply integrated. Psychological warfare focuses on targeting the opponent's mindset, the will of their leaders, the morale of their troops, the confidence of their population. Legal warfare, or lawfare, is used to justify their actions, both retrospectively and prospectively, under international law. For example, arguing that a military action is merely the defense of existing territorial claims, framing it legally.
Right.
Both of these are constant integrated efforts conducted across that entire conflict continuum, from peace to war.
Okay, so we've established the philosophical underpinnings, the context of national power. Now let's move to the operational theory itself. The core construct guiding how the People's Liberation Army actually builds capability at all levels is system warfare. How does this dictate their combat operations?
Right, system warfare. It's the fundamental theoretical construct now. It dictates that military operations must be planned and executed with the ultimate goal of destroying the enemy's overall operational system.
The system.
The system. Rather than focusing on conventional battles to simply take or hold physical ground, they see war as a clash of systems, not just formations hitting formations.
So instead of just fighting the enemy's tanks, they're fighting the enemy's ability to command those tanks or supply them or target with them.
Exactly. What specific targeting priorities does this create, especially down at the tactical level? Well, this theory centers on achieving what they call a paralysis attack or a decapitation attack. The Foundational Army Techniques publication specifies that system warfare dictates targeting high-value battlefield nodes. Things like radars, critical command and communication links, field artillery targeting assets, air defense systems, vital logistics nodes.
The key enablers.
Precisely. The whole idea is to neutralize the enemy senses, their coordination, their brainpower, basically undermining the system's effectiveness and coherence before directly confronting its main strength.
It sounds like a highly asymmetric approach. A smart way maybe to fight a stronger, more technologically advanced opponent. But surely system warfare requires extreme flexibility, modularity, things that have historically been weaknesses for the People's Liberation Army.
That is the crucial challenge, absolutely. It's inherent in the doctrine. Historically, yes, the People's Liberation Army was hierarchical, centralized, notoriously inflexible. It was designed for mass operations, not precision joint action.
No.
System warfare demands a modular approach. Greater mission command authority down the chain, enhanced cooperation between different service components. The Foundational Army Techniques publication notes that achieving this modularity is an ongoing commitment of their current reforms. It indicates a significant cultural and procedural shift is still necessary. It's a work in progress.
Okay. So to execute this complex system warfare, the People's Liberation Army obviously needed a complete overhaul of its command and control structure, too. It starts right at the top, with the political leadership at the Central Military Commission.
Right. The structure is highly centralized under the Chinese Communist Party. As the Foundational Army Techniques publication confirms, the People's Liberation Army is the armed wing of the party, first and foremost. Political officers supervise at every level.
And below the Central Military Commission.
Below that are the 5 theater commands. These are the highest level joint operations organizations. They're the ones who translate the strategic guidance from the top into operational realities on the ground, in the air, at sea.
And the location and mission focus of these theater commands, they seem key to understanding their operational priorities, right? What are their main areas of responsibility?
Yeah, the Training and Doctrine Command paper details these regional responsibilities pretty well. For instance, the Eastern Theater Command is heavily focused on contingency operations involving the Taiwan Strait, its adjacent airspace maritime areas. That's its clear priority.
Makes sense.
The Southern Theater Command focuses on the contentious South China Sea and the border regions there. This specialization ensures that strategic focus aligns with the specific regional threats and geography they face.
What about the central one?
The Central Theater Command primarily acts as the national strategic reserve and is responsible for the defense of the capital region, Beijing.
Got it. And the mechanism designed to coordinate the joint execution of system warfare within these theaters is the Theater Joint Operations Command Center. That sounds like the real nerve center.
It is the operational hub. The Training and Doctrine Command paper outlines the, frankly, elaborate structure of the Theater Joint Operations Command Center. It's designed specifically to ensure unity of command over all services and integrate multi-domain capabilities effectively.
How does it do that?
It achieves this by integrating 6 critical subcenters. There's land operations, maritime operations, air operations, conventional missile operations, joint logistics operations, and crucially for system warfare multi-domain operations, which covers cyber, space, and information support forces.
Wow, all under one roof.
That's the idea. This structure is intended to facilitate swift, integrated decision-making across all domains, which is essential for system warfare.
Okay, let's drill down now to the tactical level, the ground forces. The major structural reform there has been brigadization, right? Moving away from the old Soviet-style division structure.
That's right. The Combined Arms Brigade, or CABDE, is now the basic operational unit. It replaced the division structure that had defined the People's Liberation Army for decades.
Why the change?
Well, the Foundational Army Techniques publication explains that this reform was instituted to create a more flexible force, something with a streamlined command structure, designed specifically for rapid task organization in these complex joint scenarios we're talking about. The brigade structure is just inherently more modular than the old division.
And these brigades, they're not all identical, are they? They reflect different operational needs based on how mechanized they are.
That's vital context, yes. The Foundational Army Techniques publication lists 3 distinct types, and they're defined by how they intend to fight.
Okay.
First, you have light combined arms brigades. They're motorized. Their vehicles are primarily just for transport. They focus on speed, dismounted operations, rapid deployment into areas maybe with poor infrastructure.
Got it. Light and fast.
Then, medium combined arms brigades. These are mechanized. Their vehicles, like armored personnel carriers or infantry fighting vehicles, serve as actual combat platforms that support the infantry. They balance protection and mobility.
The middle ground.
And finally, heavy combined arms brigades. These are armored. They are the mainline fighting units, relying on heavy armor, tanks, superior protection for direct combat, and sustained offensive operations.
So this variety allows the theater command to tailor the force.
Exactly. Tailor it to the specific terrain and mission requirements of whatever system warfare scenario they're facing.
When we talk about the actual fighting, though, the primary building block for tactical action, that has to be the battalion, right?
That is the Combined Arms Battalion. The Foundational Army Techniques publication emphasizes that the battalion is designed to reflect the basic structure of the operational system. It's intended to be employed in something pretty close to its organic peacetime configuration. It's the primary fighting block designed to operate, ideally, somewhat independently within the brigade structure.
That sounds like an attempt at pushing mission command down to a lower echelon. But I noticed a detail in the Foundational Army Techniques publication about their staffing. Doesn't the limited staff size maybe restrict their autonomy in practice?
Ah, you picked up on that. It creates a trade-off. The Foundational Army Techniques publication does note that the Combined Arms Battalion has a lean staff compared to, say, Western equivalents.
Right.
Now, this allows for potentially faster decision-making, a flatter organizational hierarchy, which could be essential for rapid action in system warfare.
There's
However,
always a however.
always, that same lean staff may limit its ability to perform detailed planning on its own, sustain independent operations for long periods, or coordinate complex logistics over extended durations. It seems built for rapid, focused action, relying heavily on the brigade for more robust support.
Okay. Let's talk about the sharp end of informationization then, information operations. The Foundational Army Techniques publication defines these as a constant and ongoing effort before, during, and after conflict. So this isn't just a supporting task, it sounds absolutely central to the fight.
It is. Information superiority is viewed as the precondition for success in modern warfare, and the People's Liberation Army treats information operations as a zero-sum activity.
Zero sum.
Yeah, meaning any advantage gained in the information space must be protected fiercely, and any advantage the enemy gains must be eroded immediately. It's continuous offense and defense in the cognitive and electromagnetic domains.
Okay. And the attacks themselves, they fall into four distinct but interconnected categories. Let's break those down because this really sounds like the definition of multi-domain warfare.
Right, the Foundational Army Techniques publication details these four subcategories of information attack, and it shows a highly integrated approach.
What are they?
First, electromagnetic attack. This is your traditional electronic warfare, jamming enemy radar and communications, spoofing signals to deceive enemy systems.
Okay, classic EW.
Second, network attack. This is digital intrusion using viruses, sophisticated malware, hacker invasions to disrupt enemy computer systems and data networks.
Cyber warfare.
Third, psychological attack. This is a direct attack on the enemy's will to fight, targeting mindset, morale, public support for the conflict back home.
The cognitive domain.
And fourth, physical attack. This is the kinetic dimension, using missiles, bombs, or other weapons to physically destroy information systems like satellite ground stations, communication towers, or command centers.
It sounds like these four are designed to operate absolutely simultaneously to maximize that paralysis effect of system warfare.
That's exactly the idea. Physical attack creates the kinetic hole. Electromagnetic and network attacks widen that hole and prevent repair or workarounds. Psychological attack ensures the enemy can't easily recover their will or confidence.
And none of that works without good intelligence.
Precisely. They view intelligence collection and reconnaissance as the highest priority to enable this kind of layered attack.
So how important is reconnaissance then in making sure those information operations are actually effective?
Paramount. It's absolutely paramount. The Foundational Army Techniques publication stresses that reconnaissance across all domains is continuous. They view the intelligence contest itself as zero-sum.
Gaining info while denying it to the enemy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Its most important role is providing early, accurate warning about adversary intent, disposition, capabilities, even mindset. If they can gain information superiority and deny it to the enemy, they feel they've essentially won the first critical phase of the war.
This brings us to Special Operations Forces. Now, we often think of Special Operations Forces in the Western context as maybe independent counterterrorism units or doing direct action raids. But the People's Liberation Army Special Operations Forces seem to have a different, very specific mission set, explicitly tied into this system warfare concept.
Their role is distinctly different, yes. As noted in the Foundational Army Techniques publication, People's Liberation Army Special Operations Forces focus heavily on supporting conventional operations. Their primary missions are things like special reconnaissance, sabotage, and deep targeting. They aren't generally built or tasked for independent political warfare like some Western counterparts might be.
So they act more like the eyes and maybe the hands for the long-range firepower assets.
That's a good way to put it. The Foundational Army Techniques publication specifically highlights their role in providing long-range ground patrol capability, operating deep in the enemy's rear areas.
Okay.
They are often tasked with providing the precise targeting data, coordinates, confirmation, that's necessary for heavy artillery and ballistic missiles to successfully execute those paralysis or decapitation attacks against high-value systems that the main force just can't reach yet.
Okay. So When the People's Liberation Army does transition to kinetic offense, the doctrine seems very clear. The focus is on annihilation of enemy formations, not just taking ground for the sake of it.
Absolutely. The Foundational Army Techniques publication explicitly states that objectives are often described in terms of destroying specific enemy units or formations. They prioritize using a mix of maneuver, deception, and overwhelming firepower to isolate units and, well, destroy them completely.
And this emphasis on destruction over occupation, that reflects the strategic goal of minimizing risk and achieving decisive outcomes quickly, consistent with that war control idea.
Exactly. It's about achieving the objective efficiently and limiting exposure.
Okay, let's explore the key maneuver tactics they employ to achieve that annihilation, starting with encirclement.
Right. Encirclement, in their doctrine, is more than just physically surrounding an enemy unit. The Foundational Army Techniques publication details it as the complete isolation of the enemy force, which can be both physical and psychological.
How so?
It's achieved through a coordinated application of ground units blocking movement, massed firepower suppressing them, robust deception operations confusing them, and information warfare degrading their command and control. For example, simultaneously cutting off a key escape road physically while using psychological warfare to flood the trapped unit's network with false reports that their higher command has been destroyed. That achieves a deeper, more paralyzing kind of encirclement.
That sounds incredibly decisive, almost a totalizing tactic. How does penetration fit into their offensive scheme?
Penetration is designed to unbalance the enemy and seize the initiative rapidly. It involves a mobile element, maybe armor or mechanized forces, breaking through the enemy's defensive line, ideally at a weak or vulnerable point, and then aggressively driving forward into the rear area, deliberately bypassing enemy strong points that might slow them down.
Why is that so foundational?
The Foundational Army Techniques publication states this tactic is foundational for modern People's Liberation Army offensive operations because it disrupts the enemy's command structure from behind, cuts off logistics, and hinders their ability to coordinate an effective counterattack. Speed and aggression are the absolute keys to making it work.
And finally, they still employ infiltration, right? A tactic may be rooted in their people's war heritage, but updated now for this informationized battlefield.
Yes, infiltration is primarily used by light infantry or special operations forces, simply because large mechanized forces can't really move covertly.
Right.
The tactic, as described in the Foundational Army Techniques publication, is all about closing with the enemy covertly, using stealth and speed to offset the enemy's inherent firepower advantages. The thinking is, if you can close the distance undetected, their precision long-range fires can't be brought to bear effectively before contact is made.
So it's a way of neutralizing a technological edge by denying the space needed to use it.
Exactly. Get inside their standoff range.
We've mentioned firepower repeatedly as a critical element. The People's Liberation Army's investment in things like rocket artillery and missile systems is just massive. Why such an enormous focus on kinetic strike capability?
Well, the Foundational Army Techniques publication identifies this massive investment in fire support, particularly the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force with its ballistic and cruise missiles, and the Army's own rocket artillery, as the primary tool designed to offset perceived or acknowledged technological or maneuver gaps against sophisticated adversaries, like the U.S.
So firepower is seen as the great equalizer.
It really is.
Yeah.
If they believe they can overwhelm the enemy with massed, precise, long-range fire, they think they can negate the enemy's potentially superior maneuver capability or air superiority, for example.
Let's talk about the tactical advantage this provides them. The Combined Arms Brigade's organic firepower density. You mentioned it's strikingly high compared to Western equivalents.
It is. This is a really unique and critical characteristic. The Foundational Army Techniques publication highlights that the typical Combined Arms Brigade's artillery battalion fields around 27 guns, mostly 122 millimeter howitzers. And this is the key part. They usually include a light rocket battery as an organic asset within the brigade.
Organic rockets at the brigade level.
Yes, many Western Brigade equivalents often lack organic rocket artillery at that echelon. They rely on division or corps assets. This gives the People's Liberation Army Combined Arms Brigade a distinct immediate advantage in terms of the sheer volume of massed, mobile fire support available on demand, right there under the brigade commander's control.
And this overwhelming capability is so core to system warfare that they actually define a separate type of attack around it. The firepower attack.
That's right. The firepower attack is defined as massing firepower capabilities, and this includes field artillery, long-range missiles, air attack, even integrated network attack on a specific target to achieve an offensive effect without necessarily requiring physical occupation of the terrain or even close contact by ground troops.
Pure effect-based warfare.
Pretty much. It's designed to isolate, annihilate, or simply fix enemy units in place purely through overwhelming long-range destructive force. This then allows their own maneuver elements to exploit the resulting paralysis or destruction.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about defense. On this modern, informationized battlefield, the Foundational Army Techniques publication notes that traditional defensive advantages, things like effective concealment, hardened positions, having secure depth, are rapidly eroding.
Yeah, that erosion is a direct consequence of the very informationization we've been discussing. Advanced multi-spectrum reconnaissance satellites, drones, cyber espionage, and precision long-range strike capabilities mean that rear areas, supply depots, command posts, things once considered relatively safe, can now be targeted effectively with both lethal and non-lethal means.
So the battlefield is becoming transparent.
Increasingly so. This forces the defender to integrate multi-domain defenses actively. They have to dedicate resources not just to stopping tanks, but also to defending against psychological attacks, electromagnetic jamming, cyber intrusions, in addition to physical attacks. The modern battlefield offers very little sanctuary.
To illustrate their defensive approach, the Training and Doctrine Command paper uses the example of a joint anti-landing campaign. How does this look in practice? How would they try to defeat a seaborne invasion?
Right, this campaign concept, it involves 4 overlapping phases, typically. Prepare to defend, positional defense, blocking penetration, and counterattack. The defensive scheme is highly layered.
Layered how?
Well, they often use light infantry units, supported by extensive obstacles mines, barriers right up front, near invasion beaches, or potential airborne landing zones. Their job is primarily to fix the enemy, slow them down, channelize them.
Okay, fix them in place.
Then, they support that front line with mobile reserves, things like light armor or infantry fighting vehicles positioned deeper in the defense zone. These reserves are ready to execute decisive, short-range counterattacks specifically designed to defeat any enemy penetrations after the enemy is already ashore and potentially disorganized or bottlenecked.
So the light forces fix, bog them down, and then the mobile reserves hit them hard to destroy them.
That's the basic concept, yes. Finally, we should clarify the critical role of paramilitary forces in maintaining security, specifically the People's Armed Police.
Right, they're not technically part of the People's Liberation Army proper.
Correct. The People's Liberation Army Armed Forces officially include the People's Liberation Army itself, the People's Armed Police, and the China Militia. The Foundational Army Techniques publication explains that the People's Armed Police, along with other groups like the China Coast Guard and the Maritime Militia, plays a crucial role in internal security and also in hybrid warfare scenarios or gray zone activities.
What's their main role in a large conflict?
In a major conflict, they would handle many low-intensity security duties in rear areas, things like guarding supply depots, securing routes of march, protecting critical civilian infrastructure like power plants or bridges.
Which frees up the main army units.
Exactly. This frees up the more technologically sophisticated and professional People's Liberation Army forces to focus entirely on frontline, high-intensity combat duties. It's essentially a force multiplier, ensuring that logistics and internal lines of communication remain secure without drawing significant combat power away from the decisive points.
Okay, that brings us towards wrapping up this deep dive.
Right. So to summarize, I think the single most fundamental strategic shift in the People's Liberation Army's philosophy, the core takeaway, is the move from that rigid, quantity-focused people's war concept to a much more flexible, quality-focused, informationized system warfare.
And that shift, it demands professionalization, deep joint integration, and this focus on destroying the enemy system through precision fires and information operations rather than just occupying terrain.
Correct.
So for you, the listener, understanding these foundational concepts, active defense with its offensive core, the broad political context of comprehensive national power, and the overwhelming operational importance of system warfare, that seems absolutely essential for anticipating how they might act across that whole competition continuum, from peace to crisis to conflict.
Exactly. And we've seen throughout this discussion how informationization is really the core of their modern doctrine, which brings us back to that non-kinetic element, psychological warfare. It's fascinating that the Foundational Army Techniques publication discusses the necessity of preparing friendly populations and troops to actively resist enemy psychological attacks and propaganda. They even suggest methods for internal narrative control to bolster their own side's morale.
Yeah, defense against psyops is part of their planning. Given that psychological warfare is integrated right down to the battalion level, constantly targeting the enemy soldiers' fighting spirit, their will, their morale, and in today's global media environment where every narrative is instantly contested,
Hmm.
we have to ask ourselves, maybe, this final question. If the People's Liberation Army is explicitly targeting the cognitive domain as a key battlefield, is protecting friendly forces' minds from enemy psychological attack, perhaps the most critical yet often underestimated form of defense on the future informationized battlefield. Something to think about as you consider this doctrine.